chances of you being unemployed. This is actually a very shocking fact that was revealed by the India Employment Report 2024 by the International Labour Organization. Now, this report says that the unemployment among the educated youth has only doubled between the years 2000 to 2022, which means 83% of India's jobless population is under the age of 34. Even wages have remained either stagnant or seem to be declining. And what's really driving this unemployment crisis? The question is there a solution as well for this? And joining in for that discussion, we have Aditya Narayan Mishra, Director and CEO at Ciel HR Services. There's Madan Sabnavis as well, the Chief Economist at Bank of Baroda, and Ramani Dathi, CFO at Teamlease Services as well, joining in. Thank you all so much for taking time out. And it's pretty shocking statistics, Madan, that I'd like to get off with you, start off with you, talking about 83% of the joblessness and how that is within the youth despite being educated.
Actually, Avanne, there are two issues out here. One is the availability of jobs. And I think what we have seen is that in the last 5 years, that is even before the pandemic really set in, that most of the jobs were actually being created more in the financial sector, the IT sector. We have not really seen too much happening in the other part of the service sector or even the manufacturing sector. So one is a case of saying the demand for labor itself has come down. The second is when we're talking in terms of the educated people being unemployed, it's a case of the quality of education. So lots of the time we feel that a person who's a graduate or maybe a school dropout or maybe maximum a graduate is an educated person, but we really don't have the right kind of jobs for these kind of people because do not really have the kind of skill sets. So that's one reason why they get excluded. And I think what the report also is talking of a large number of jobs being created in the construction sector. Now, typically, if we're looking at the construction sector, these are jobs which don't really require much of an education. And even they're actually low skill kind of jobs. So that's where we have seen employment being generated. So I think that the two issues are, A, we need the economy to grow. We need the manufacturing sector to grow. That is what creates a demand for jobs. And the second part is that people need to be reskilled. And today, when we're talking of a larger use of technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, that itself means that overall demand for jobs are going to come down, and it's not very easy for people to get reskilled. So I think that's the major challenge for the economy.
Ramani, how would you look at this conundrum, and do you concur with Madan as well that when it comes to manufacturing, that's where we need a larger impetus? And how do you see this sort of problem being addressed? Ramani, is my audio reaching you? That question was for you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I got you now.
Yeah, so I was just talking about whether or not you agree with Madan Sabnavis talking about how manufacturing, that's where we need the real impetus, and what you believe needs to be done in order to solve the problem.
No, I completely agree with the comments that he made because this is something which we have been seeing over the last 15 years. So almost 80 to 85% of the jobs that we have created over the last 15 years are all into service industry. So only 15% of them have been towards manufacturing or other related services. The main issue here that we have noticed is the skill gap, because while the kids are having the degrees on hand, they're not fully equipped to take up jobs in the manufacturing sector. So we clearly need a skill bridging solution, which can be in the form of either an apprenticeship or on-the-job training or some sort of work integrated degree programs to bridge this gap.
Okay. I'd like to also get in your take then and find out what you, Aditya, make of the overall data that we have. Do you believe that quality jobs are in short supply, and that largely is one of the key reasons for this statistic?
Yeah, I think what's happening in our country for the last few years is jobless growth. Technology has been kind of proliferating across the world. And one is able to create higher level of output per person, especially in manufacturing, Also in construction, in many ways, that the labor productivity, possibly due to the use of higher degree of automation, it has gone up. So the number of people that were required to do that job is reducing. And this has become extremely huge in the IT and various other services industry. So jobless growth has become a major challenge in all around the world, in fact, and India is no exception. If we don't use the automation, then we will fall behind. So there is no question of not using. However, the point is that how we can really, as a country, do some of these things Ramani and Madan have already spoken about, as to apprenticeship and so the skill gap bridging. That is something. Underemployment is a huge crisis in our country. So there are people who have educational qualifications, but the industry is not able to use them fully. So they need a bridging program, which the government is trying through its apprenticeship program, but I think there is a lot more which needs to be done. Then thirdly, a woman participation in our economy, though it might have gone up in the rural areas, it might have gone up in the manufacturing and the construction industry, but there is a huge amount of unemployment and underemployment or unrecognized employment which happens in this particular side. So we have 7 to 10 million youth coming in, joining the workforce every year. And this is going to happen for the next few years as well. So there is a huge challenge of job creation. So the job creation, Madan already spoke about the manufacturing sector, how to boost the jobs there, how to create investments, bring in investment. Government has been investing, but all of us know that the private participation and the investment has been limited.
Right. Right,
So
Madan.
that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
Right. Madan, if you could just, come in on the overall conundrum, if you will, when it comes to wages as well, stagnant or either declining. So how exactly can this trend change?
So the trend will change only when the economy goes to a higher phase of growth, and we actually see growth on a sustained basis in the region of around 7.5 to 8%. Because ultimately, if we say that when the economy keeps growing, automatically there's demand for labor. When there is demand for labor, there would also be a case of saying that your wages will start increasing at all levels. We're just not talking of the skill levels, which go in the form of salaries, but also in terms of wages at the lower levels. Now, what we're trying to do very, very artificially is that we have the NREGA wage, which becomes some kind of a standard in the market when you're talking in terms of rural wages, or even for wages when you're talking of semi-skilled kind of jobs. So if you're talking of a plumber, you're talking of a carpenter, all those salaries, normally wages or rather, they tend to get linked with the NREGA wage. And that's something which on the government's part has been trying to increase it. But at the end of the day, these wages can be justified only in case there's productivity. And if there's higher productivity, which can be supported by this higher wage, that's when we will see a higher growth taking place in the economy. So the crux is really to have higher growth in the economy. It's a very slow process. It cannot really happen overnight. And what we have seen is that the days when the economy was growing at around 8% per annum, if we just looked at the private corporate sector, that is not just a private, let's say the overall corporate sector, looked at the balance sheets of companies, seen what their headcount is, and seen what kind of growth was there, it would normally be in the region of 6 to 7%. But today we see while the economy is growing at around 7%, if I actually leave aside the IT and the banking sector, and to a certain extent your construction sector, we actually see that the growth in employment, in headcount, is not more than 1%. So I think this gap can be bridged only when we have higher growth. I don't think there is anything which the government can do specifically about it, because these jobs are actually created in the private sector. And the private sector does not hire people until you see the productivity, unless you see a turnover increasing, until you see your profits improve. But the private sector works on the basis of profitability. I'm going to employ people if I'm not able to get the right kind of value out of them. So therefore, I think it's going to be a slow process. I'm of course optimistic. I think this scenario will be changing, but we also need to, in parallel, ensure that this labor force is better skilled.
And, just getting your take, Ramani, in terms of the private sector, the CEA is very categorical in saying that it is the private sector that must do the hiring. Is this something that you would concur with?
Yes, definitely. And to some extent, that's the trend which we have already been seeing over the last few years. But the main thing which we have seen as a direct proportion to wage inflation is formalization. Because in formal sectors, we have been consistently seeing the wages anywhere rising between 6 to 12% per annum over the last few years, and being higher in the private sector. Whereas in informal sector, as the report has rightly pointed out, the wages have been stagnant. And since 80% of the working population are employed in informal sector, so we are seeing the overall wage inflation being stagnant. So the only solution to that would be more formalization and more, as Madan has pointed out, more productivity coming in from private sector would definitely help on that point.
All right. I'm going to have to take time out to thank all of you for joining in and giving us your expert take. Unfortunately, we're completely timed out. So Ramani, Madan, as well as Aditya, it's been good having you for this discussion. Let's move right on.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.